Good morning. I'm here representing the Construction Industry Institute today, and with a message I'd like to give after Jeff gave me the introduction there, the front-end planning and the importance of front-end planning to improving that wrench time, which is what we're really trying to do. One of my mottos has always been the only purpose of project management is to create the environment for success. That's the only purpose we serve as project managers. And in order to create that environment for success, you have to make sure that the people you're asking to do the work have everything they need. And everything they need is information. They need tools and they need materials. And I guarantee you they can turn the wrench if you can do that for them. We're the problem in most cases when you look at productivity. And it all starts with front-end planning. So I want to talk a little bit about the strategic value of front-end planning. One of our mottos is to manage with certainty. And this is some data that comes from CII. The difference between successful and unsuccessful projects, it's huge. So it can really sink the ship. And if the average project is $1.8 billion in the oil sands, 56 or 53% overrun is going to do some damage to your bottom line. There's no doubt about it. So the incentive is there to make sure that you have good projects. Now, in all fairness and disclosure, I'm a contractor. So I need to make it very clear that I'm a contractor. I'm not an owner. And for the most part, it's pretty tough out there, at least in the States. We have to bid pretty closely in order to get our projects. This is about the size of boat I can afford on a normal contract. However, for those of you who don't do a good job of front-end planning, this is what I end up walking away with. And this is my change order fees that are going to hit you right smack in the face if you don't do a good job of scoping that project out. All right, Construction Industry Institute, for those of you who've never heard of it, it's a consortium of 100 leading owners and engineering contractors. They get together and the objective is to improve practices throughout the industry, and we're worldwide now. We started out just in the United States, but we're now worldwide. It's a global organization. We've got 14 best practices that are documented and by research studies, and Professor Haas over here is one of our esteemed colleagues who does a lot of the research and everything, and so they validate this in the industry. We have a benchmarking program that CII members are free to join. So I encourage any of you to join CII, gain the benefit of these best practices, and start improving the way we do projects. Front-end planning consists of a series of structured processes. The key here is consistency. You want structured processes. Front-end planning tool sets involve we have a roadmap, we have some measurement, we have alignment, and we spend a lot of time on renovation and revamp. I'm going to explain that to you in a minute. Definition of front-end planning. You're really just developing that information. You're trying to address the risk and make sure that you have maximized that potential for a successful project. For those of you who've never seen the cost influence curve, what this chart says is that before you start detailed engineering, you have the ability to influence your project. The minute you start putting people on detailed engineering and you start buying things, whatever you had in mind in that first little segment, it's going to happen to you guys. So you're kind of hanging on for the road at that point. So there's your opportunity, FEL 1, 2, and 3, to make that difference. Because once you get that thing in motion, it just takes off. Okay, the structured front-end planning from CII looks kind of like this. This is their model, and I'm going to blow this up. You have 3 phases. You have what you call a feasibility phase, a concept phase, and a detailed scope phase. If you blow that up a little more, it's going to look like this. You have a business assessment. You're going to select some alternatives, and then you're going to go in and you're going to define that scope. And the real trick is to define your scope to the degree that somebody can estimate it and schedule it, and that in a way that it can be executed. And that it varies by different companies, but the objective here is get all stakeholders to agree. These are some of the things that you'll be doing. You're selecting your projects with the highest potential. You'll select the preferred process or technology, and then you'll actually define that scope. Then you go on into execution, and hopefully you'll start this thing up, and you'll make your adjustments, and you'll have a successful project, and you'll provide the feedback the next time, and you'll improve your front-end planning process. Simply stated, you're doing the right project. And what I failed to mention was at that gate, you stop at each gate and say, does this project still meet my hurdle requirements? Does it still meet my business objectives? Kill a project quickly. If a project is not meeting your expectations, kill it and go on and get another one. Don't spend resources on a project that's not going to give you the return you want. More important, you're laying the foundation for that managing with certainty to make sure that you're going to complete that thing on budget and on schedule. This is what you don't want to happen to you, okay? Surprises are usually not good. Okay, research background for we started this research in 1991. That's when I first started with the CII, and we developed what we call pre-project planning. Yet, is there a structured process that you go through to plan a process? Once we finished that, we said, okay, we got a structured process, but you still have no measurement, no way to measure, is this project completely defined or not? So we developed what we call a project definition rating index. And a PDRI is a simple tool that can be administered usually in less than 2 or 3 hours. You go through a series of 70 questions, and you can validate or score your project as to where you are on the charts according to CII, whether your project is going to be successful, what are your major risk factors. So it's a real easy to use tool. Then we went on, and that was for industrial projects, by the way. After that, we said, well, we need one for buildings. And after that, well, we need one for infrastructure. So we now have what we call the PDRI trilogy: buildings, infrastructure, and industrial projects. Each one of them have their own little nuances. And it's not improbable that you'll have a project that may use all three. You may use the infrastructure, which is the pipeline portion. You use the building because you're going to put a bunch of buildings up there for your personnel, and you may have some kind of a processing unit along with that. So you use all three in that case, and we have those tools for you. Now, since that time, we've come up with additions 2005, 2008, 2010. We're currently working on a program right now to upgrade all of the front-end planning resources and tools, put them in a neat little bow, package them up, and make them easier for the industry to use. Aliases, you've heard FEED, feasibility analysis, FEL, FEED, I think Chevron uses CHIP DIP, many different acronyms for this, but the key is do a structured front-end planning process. You can't afford not to. Here's some of the research behind it. There's 10 sponsor contracts, 135, over 200 companies, $58 billion worth of projects went into this. 60% industrial, that's where we've done most of our research. 25% on buildings and 15% on infrastructure, because infrastructure is brand new. It just came out about 1.5 years ago. So we'll have more information on infrastructure. We're constantly collecting that data, and give us 2 years and we'll have a pretty good bevy of infrastructure projects also. Over 200 interviews, 38 case studies, 23 workshops, 300 plus participants, questionnaires, etc. 5 PhDs. That's kind of scary, and 5 PhDs working on this stuff. So recent research, we got 29 cases, 70 questionnaires, etc. So this is all the data. I'm not going to read it to you, but there is a lot of research that went into this. How much does it cost to do front-end planning? It does cost you some money. It costs some time. It's going to run you roughly 4.2% of total installed cost if your project is greater than $5 million. If it's less than $5 million, it's going to cost you more, just for what it's worth. It costs more to do a good job of planning on smaller projects. And there's reasons for that. I don't want to get into it right now, but you need to be prepared for that. Rule of thumb, it's going to cost you 2 to 6% of TIC for greater than $5 million, 4 to 9% if you're less than $5 million projects. So there again, there's a sample of projects, results from the good planning, or you pretty much count on 10% less cost, 7% shorter delivery, and 5% fewer changes. And really, if you look at the spread, it's really, really wide. It gets really bad in some cases. There's some rules of the game. We got define that front-end planning process. Have a good structured process. Use scope definition tools, and for whatever you do, make sure you fully understand your existing site conditions, even on a greenfield. What do those site conditions look like? If you're doing a revamp, this becomes extremely important. I think one of the most underrated things is your contracting and procurement strategy. You really need to spend time and think out that contracting and procurement strategy, and then validate it, and then validate it again. Because 9 times out of 10, what you thought was going to be your contracting strategy won't work when you actually get into the reality of things. And we have some tools for that that'll help you validate your contracting strategy before you go off on the deep end. Alignment is huge, and one of the reasons you have so many scope changes is you have not got all the stakeholders in the room. You have not gotten agreement from all the stakeholders in the room, and somebody will torpedo you, and that's usually an operations guy, just for what it's worth. So you'll be running down the road, fat, dumb, and happy, and operations guy can say, what? And he'll start changing things on you, and you got a problem. There's familiarity with project type. You want to make sure that your project management team understands the type of project you're doing. If you're doing a pipeline, get a guy who's done a pipeline, okay? Don't get a guy who does buildings, etc. Team building is hugely important, and team building is where you align all your team members. And I'm not talking about playing games and climbing ropes here. I'm talking about getting people in the room to talk about their expectations. What are the requirements from each other? Talk about real issues there. And we have templates for how to do successful team building successful projects. You want experienced and capable personnel, and of course leadership. You got to have a good project manager on anything, and it's execution, execution, execution. Front-end planning rules, they got some rules that you're going to interface with a lot of different people, so interface management is huge. Do as much as you can to understand those existing site conditions. You want experienced planners, and I stress planning before you schedule. So many people just go in and develop a schedule. Develop a plan first. Validate your plan, check your plan, get alignment on your plan, then bring in your schedulers. So that's one of the biggest problems we see. You got to follow the structured process. Work breakdown structure. Your contracting strategy and your work breakdown structure really need to be in alignment. And there are some tools to make sure those are in alignment. This is where other people go wrong. That's why your contracting strategy won't work in many cases. Your engineering company isn't engineering in the manner that's going to support your contracting strategy. You're not going to be able to buy things in a manner that's going to be able to support your contracting strategy. So make sure you do a good job of that work breakdown structure. And the other thing is renovation and revamp projects. They're 35% of your capital, but according to the industry, 77% of your projects are revamp and renovation. And they require a lot of extra work and a lot of extra talent, really, to work on them. I'm going to give you an overview here. This will scare the heck out of you. You got FEP2, you got FEP3. This is a little chart that shows you some of the things you need to be doing in these various phases. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but as you can see, there's a lot of activities that go on in these different phases. And our front-end planning, our community of practice for CII conducts 4-hour workshops that actually goes through a lot of these different things and shows you the tools that are available through CII to help you weather this little roadmap right here. But there's a whole lot of activity. Now I'm going to summarize it and make it a little easier. This is a little bit easier chart to read right here. If you got that start button over there, you got some PFDs, you got some, all right. Process flow diagrams, I'm sorry. You define your process, and then you develop some engineering flow diagrams that got a little more detail with your instrumentation, your control systems, and your philosophies on it. Those things have to be managed. Out of those comes all of your what we call control list, a list of equipment that I have to buy, a list of instrumentation that we have to engineer and buy, etc. The list of lines that we have to do, which generates the number of ISOs that I have to build. And all of this stuff is done during the front-end planning process, or a lot of it. And that's what you need to manage right here. This is the area where you need help managing this documentation, because in the end, you're going to end up with a deliverable list for FEP2 and FEP3. Those deliverable lists become the basis of your estimate. They're based on the scope, and they become the basis of your estimate, and that's what you're going to control against. So make sure you define those deliverables, you've managed those deliverables, and you've got the proper people to take part in and to get alignment and buy in to all of those deliverables. And with that, if you do this right, you should be able to go on, and you've set the stage, you've laid the foundation for a successful project. How can Coreworx help? You need automated services, trained operators, and above all, disciplined execution. It's got to be consistent, and it's got to be disciplined across projects as you go. Coreworx tools, they got deliverables management. You're going to manage those deliverables. They have to go out for approvals, etc. Where are they? Who all's looked at them? Who needs to look at them? You got your front-end planning oversight modules. You got interface management. And then, of course, hopefully you won't need this one, but you probably will, is change management. What's going to change? You know, you've got to manage that change and manage that change very carefully. But these are just tools. And man doesn't always use tools in the most effective manner. And that's why you need trained operators to use your tools, and you need discipline. And with that, I'm going to leave you with a little bit of wisdom. Now your challenge is to go on, use front-end planning, and do great things, okay? Thank you, that's it.